What if World War III started today? Like, if the actual conflict started today, like if NATO declares war. So basically, what would happen? So Russia annexed this whole area right here, this entire area right here, and basically, today, Poland just declares war on Russia. This would drag all of NATO into war with Russia. And also, we'll be using no nukes, as it'll just end in the nuclear winter and we'll all die. So we'll be doing, of course, what if no nukes were used? What if no nuclear bombs were used in this war, and we were just dragged into a massive military conflict with the Russian Federation and Belarus? So I'm getting all of the NATO countries into the war. Wait, Bosnia is not part of NATO. Also, we gotta draw Kosovo. Kosovo is like this. That's Kosovo. They don't have Kosovo on this map, so I draw Kosovo. So all of NATO would be dragged into war. I don't know if, and also Finland and Sweden would be dragged into war, as their NATO applications would be accepted as well. It would also drag the USA and Canada into war with Russia as well. And yes, I have to call in all those islands, even though those islands will, of course, serve no purpose. They will serve no purpose in the war because no one lives in them. Really, on most of these islands that Canada owns, like 2 people live on them. Like, that's how little people live on. Of course, Greenland, because the power of Denmark, will also be in the war as well. And of course, Hawaii. So we have it done. And also Iceland, I think. And also, let's not forget about this island up here that really won't serve that much of a purpose. So now the war has started. Russia, if you do not know, Russia wasn't really using much of the military in the war of Ukraine. Now they'll use the whole army and continue drafting people into the war against the West as well. Well, Ukraine, running out of manpower, will demand Western countries as Russia starts to actually push into Ukraine. Russia also starts to push into the Russian majority areas in the Baltic areas. And now it's trying to push into the Baltic countries to overall. Syria joins the war against Turkey, as Russia promises to end all of the terrorist groups in Syria. Israel declares war on Syria. With the help of Russian troops and troops from other countries, the terrorists are expelled from Syria. But now Syria has to fight against Turkey. Turkey starts to push back against Syria, but Turkey now is having an inflation problem. Turkey's current inflation rate is 80%, and now because the government's banned the war, Turkey is unable to really fight against Syria because of inflation. Pro-Russia protests began in France over Macron helping NATO. These protests were going on for weeks now, and now have escalated into a full-blown war against French rebels. French rebels start to organize around the area. Demanding an exit from the war and start to gain ground. NATO starts to fight against the rebels in France. Meanwhile, right-wing leaders of Europe call it a dictatorship to try to keep in war with Russia. Russia is unable to advance in the Finland area and sends very little troops to fight there. Throughout the winter, the Ukraine battle has basically become a stalemate. As manpower in Ukraine continues to plummet. I forgot Montenegro's part of NATO. I forgot. But now, another battle is brewing in the east. Due to America crippling China's semiconductor industry, China declares war on America and wants to recapture Taiwan. Japan and Korea declare war on China, on Chinese aggression. North Korea, of course, gladly takes this as an opportunity and does what Kim Jong-un and nukes South Korea. Everybody condemns North Korea, and Kim Jong-un is forced on his own side, as China seeks to contain Kim Jong-un, as the agreement was no nuclear weapons. China swiftly invades North Korea because of Kim Jong-un's recklessness, and Kim Jong-un is forced to surrender, and a pro-Chinese puppet state was installed in North Korea, which means the North Korean regime still exists, just not under Kim Jong-un. China starts their invasion of Taiwan. America is stretched between the east and the west, as protests and riots continue throughout the country because of war. Anti-war sentiments reach an all-time high, and in parts of the U.S., armed protesters just start showing up at rallies as well of both political parties. Russia starts to move into Ukraine. Russia's economy itself, however, isn't taking very similar to China's because their economy isn't backed by the US dollar. Europe is also going through a fuel crisis, and England plunges into a civil war as Scotland seeks independence and starts fighting a war for independence. Countries like protests in Germany had started over energy costs. The Italian Prime Minister makes Italy quit the war over massive protests, similar to Hungary as well. The EU and NATO blast this as traitors, as Belarus starts to invade Ukraine even more with the help. Oh, I forgot Moldova is in part of NATO. The Moldovan president, which sided with NATO, finally quits after months of anti-war protests. Europe starts to go into a civil war, which is very not really covered on social media. The media at this point is now blasting people for protesting against the governments. Scotland gains their independence and seeks an exit from the war. The United Kingdom as a country collapses. Collapses as well. Well, as the UK spirals out of control. The French protests only continue to get the French war continues to get worse and worse. As parts of southern France is annexed by the new French protests. The French. China's invasion of Korea continues. As both South Korea and China may soon agree on a border, as South Korea is swiftly running out of troops and Japan is swiftly running out of troops because of the demographic crisis and the demographic issues. And this seeks to be a problem in South Korea, before South Korea faces near collapse. The Battle of Taiwan continues. Australia and New Zealand are pushed into war against China, which is a deeply unpopular decision, and protests in Australia and New Zealand demand the Prime Ministers to be removed for declaring war on China. Pakistan and India declare war on each other. Iran declares war on the West, along with Kazakhstan and several other countries. World War III isn't looking exactly going too well for the West, as America is about to collapse into a civil war, as tensions reach an all-time high between both right-leaning and left-leaning people and several other factions and anti-war factions. America starts to enter a hyperinflation area and states officially secede from America, Florida being the first state to secede from the Union, creating a new United States of America as well. Texas becomes the second state to secede from the Union. A massive influx of American refugees start coming into Mexico as well. Well, because of mass hyperinflation. The state of Idaho also secedes. I can't get the exact borders of Idaho, so I'm sorry to anyone who lives in Idaho. As well. America collapses into a civil conflict as more and more states secede from the Union. As well. Well, the world food crisis becomes a massive problem for Western countries heading into spring of 2023. More protests come out of countries like Poland and Germany and Czech Republic, and the government do not know why these protests are happening. And the media smears them as pro-Russian protests, but they're really anti-war protests. Macron is finally forced to quit the war after massive protests. After France falls into a civil war of its own. Ukraine collapses, and a pro-Russian government is installed. Turkey collapses due to hyperinflation. Iraq joins the war, along with Jordan. In a way to free Palestine from, of course, Saudi Arabia. South Korea and Japan make a peace deal with China, citing inflation and food concerns. China deals with its own economic woes of its own. Meanwhile, the battle between India and Pakistan becomes very deadly, and millions die. Both countries immediately end the war and cause a ceasefire because of food concerns. China finally takes back Taiwan, and the Taiwanese government is no longer deemed legitimate. New borders are established between North and the new Chinese North Korea, the new Chinese puppet of Korea, and of course the Republic of Korea. Poland finally exits the war after mass protests. The Baltic states surrender and become Russian puppet states. European countries continue to surrender due to mass protests in 8 countries. The Western countries decided to make a peace deal with Russia as far right people try to take power. And this makes the end of World War III, as it's done by people born wine. But due to instability, the West collapses very quickly due to food insecurity and stuff. But the final battle begins with the invasion of Georgia. Georgia surrenders within a couple of days. And the battle against Israel begins. Without America to help Israel's small population is overrun by Iranian troops. Iranian, Iraqi, Syrian, and Jordanian troops. It is now the end of 2023. And Australia, due to demands, finally caves to the demands of its people and to make peace with Russia and China. I forgot about Alaska. Canada is the last country that is at war with the Eastern powers, along with Iceland, with Iceland assigns peace, a day after Australia. Now it's really just Canada. Canada finally makes a peace. After a day later, Justin Trudeau finally makes a peace deal with Canada after mass protests in Canada due to food shortages and due to instability. Finally makes peace with China, no, and Russia. The media sees this as a public surrender to Russia, and sees this as and many on the right see this as the decay, the end of Western dominance over the globe, and a new era will begin. And Israel is forced to recognize Palestine as a separate country as of the peace treaty of the Arab states. This is deemed as one of the biggest failures in. This would be deemed as one of the biggest failures in Western history, World War III. Goodbye. Oh yeah, I forgot this area.